Hello, everyone. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another edition of Budget Magic. So, this week, we are heading to Modern for a deck that walks the line between tribal and devotion. This is mono blue wizard devotion, and I think this deck is actually pretty fun and pretty sweet. As you can see, 94 bucks in the paper world, 19 ticks on Magic Online, so not a bad price for a really sweet deck. A quick reminder before we break down mono blue wizard devotion for Modern. If you enjoy Budget Magic and the other series here on the channel, it would be amazing of you if you could take a quick second, click that subscribe button down in the corner of your screen. It's a great way to support the channel and the site for free. So let's talk Mono Blue Wizard Devotion, and to really understand the deck, we gotta start by talking about the non-wizard. So we start off with two 1-mana blue flyers, Judge's Familiar, Mausoleum Wanderer, and these cards are really important to the deck for two reasons. So first off, they add devotion. They are a blue mana symbol added to the battlefield on turn 1, and our deck wants a lot of blue devotion. That's where our finishers are. We can make lots of mana with it. The other thing that these cards do is help us stay alive against unfair decks. So if our opponent's trying to combo off with Storm or with Ad Nauseam, decks like that, the ability to have these force spikes sitting on the battlefield is actually really, really strong. In the worst case, it forces our opponent to play off curve. If they want to anger the gods our board, they got to pay 4 mana, or we'll Judge's Familiar it or Mausoleum Wanderer it. In the best case, we just kind of lock our opponent out of doing anything relevant. It's really hard for Ad Nauseam, for example, to cast all their combo pieces through Judge's Familiar and Mausoleum Wanderer. That's already mana intensive, and having enough mana to cast it and pay for our Force Spike birds is actually a challenge. So it's really helpful in the unfair matchups, helpful to keep our board alive against sweepers and removal, and adding blue mana symbol to the board. Our other big non-wizard creature is Nykthos Spectre, and this one's in the deck just for devotion, essentially. It's a fine creature. It gets in flying damage along with our Judge's Familiar and Mausoleum Wanderer, so we're always chipping in the air to get in a bit of damage. But the big deal here is it's 3 blue mana symbols for 3 mana, which really ups our devotion count for our big devotion payoffs. Worth noting, Nykthos Spectre, kind of old school, does not let you cast the cards as if they were any color, like you can do with Hostage Taker, for example, or Gonti. So we actually have to have the right color to mana to cast the cards we get from our opponent's library with Nykthos Spectre, which means we're kind of hoping to hit our opponent's land, or that our opponent's playing blue cards, but hit our opponent's lands, play their lands so we have the right colors of mana, and then when we hit their cards in the future, we can potentially use Nykthos Spectre for a card advantage as well. But the big deal here is these creatures all add devotion, and they're all flying to chip in for damage. So those are our non-wizards. Our big wizard payoff is Void Mage Prodigy. So this is a card that kind of makes the deck wizard devotion. So Void Mage Prodigy already does something you really want a 2-drop to do in your devotion deck, and that is add 2 mana symbols of the right color. It's a double blue card, which means it's adding a lot of devotion. The fact that a lot of wizards are color intensive and work well with Void Mage Prodigy is just kind of a bonus, and that's what pushes us towards being wizard based rather than just being full on devotion based. So the big deal with Void Mage Prodigy, apart from adding blue mana with devotion, is it lets us kind of lock our opponent out of the game. We have a counter spell sitting on the battlefield. Pay 2, sack a wizard, counter a spell all the time, which is really powerful. We can just use Void Mage Prodigy like a counterspell itself, sack our Void Mage Prodigy to counter something, but what we'd rather be doing is sacking some of our other wizards to Void Mage Prodigy, which lets us keep our Void Mage Prodigy and just basically have counterspell whenever we need it. Pass with our mana up, counter our opponent's stuff, beat down with our flyers, get in some damage, counter something else. So it gives us just like this infinite counterspell on the battlefield. So what wizards are we sacking to Void Mage Prodigy? Probably the best one is Harbinger of Tides. So Harbinger of Tides, 2 blue mana symbols, so that's already good. Wizard, so we can sack it to Void Mage Prodigy, and we get value out of it when it enters the battlefield. So we play it, bounce a Gurmag Angler, bounce a Death Shadow, whatever our opponent has, and then we can always sack it to a Void Mage Prodigy. So it's kind of build your own Venser almost, where you bounce a creature and then can use it to counter something on the way back down. So Harbinger of Tides gives us a bit of removal that also has lots of blue mana symbols, can always be a counter spell in a pinch. Then we have a couple of one-of Guild Mage. So Dimir Guild Mage, Azorius Guild Mage. We only have blue mana in our deck, so we can't use their off-color abilities, but they're still pretty sweet. So Dimir Guild Mage, 2 blue mana symbols, lets us pay 4 to draw a card, which means once we get a ton of mana with Nykthos and working that direction, we can just use Guild Mage to repeatedly draw an extra card, maybe 2 extra cards a turn, find our finishers, find more wizards. Azorius Guild Mage is a 3 mana stifle essentially on a stick. So our opponent goes to crack a fetch, 3 mana counter it. Opponent goes to activate a planeswalker, 3 mana counter it. Opponent goes to ghost quarter our Nykthos, 3 mana counter it. So we can use this to have additional value by leaving up our mana during our opponent's turn. So with a Void Mage Prodigy out and an Azorius Guild Mage, we have not just a counter spell we can activate at any time, but also a stifle we can activate at any time, which is really powerful. Plus they're both wizards, so we can sack them. Wistful Zalki is like the best devotion slash sacrifice wizard. So 3 blue mana symbols, which is what we want in our 3-drop. It draws us a card, so it doesn't cost us a card. And then we can sacrifice it to our Void Mage Prodigy as a counter spell. So it just kind of does everything we want in this deck. It adds devotion, doesn't cost a card, counters something. So just a really good filler 3-drop alongside our Nightvale Spectre. Gives us 8 3-drops with triple blue in them, which really powers up our 4 mana devotion plays that we'll talk about in a minute. Finally, we have a couple of one-of wizards. Venser, Shaper Savant, a way we can deal with an annoying permanent on the battlefield or a spell on the stack, and then we can always turn it into an actual counter spell with the help of Void Mage Prodigy. Maloku the Crowded Mirror probably looks weird, but this is kind of our devotion payoff, one of them, and also a devotion enabler. So pay 1, we bounce a land, we get a 1/1 illusion. We can make a board full of flyers. We've seen with Lingering Souls that a lot of decks have a hard time beating a bunch of flyers on the battlefield. So we can just pick up all of our lands at the end of our opponent's turn, make a bunch of flyers, beat our opponent down. The other sweet trick with Maloku is it lets us double activate our Nykthos. So we can add a bunch of mana with Nykthos, then we can pick up Nykthos with Maloku, play Nykthos again as our land drop for the turn, and then we tap it again, make a bunch more mana. So it's a way we can just make even more mana with our Nykthos and really make our mana production go out of control. So a pretty sweet finisher, works well with our chip in for flying damage plan to close out the game. As far as our finishers, we have 2 devotion-based finishers. So first off, Master of Waves is a big one. Master of Waves is absurd in this deck. If you think of our deck, we have 1 mana blue creatures, 2 mana double blue creatures, 3 mana triple blue creatures. If we just curve out like that, which is a really simple curve, we have redundancy and multiple copies of everything at those mana costs, that's going to give us 6 mana symbols, not counting Master of Devotion. So that's 7 blue mana symbols on turn 4 when Master comes down, which means we're getting 7 2/1s. As long as we have our Master stick around. That is a lot of power and toughness. It's basically a game-winning amount of power and toughness, adding something like 16 power to the battlefield for 4 mana. It is just an absurd finisher. Also has pro red, so our opponent can't just lightning bolt it to get around some removal. So just the best possible finisher for our deck. So powerful. Our best way to close out the game quickly. Can come down early and just steal wins. Can come down late after we have our counterspell lock set up with our Void Mage Prodigy. Our other devotion finisher is Thassa the Sea. So we have a ton of devotion, ton of blue mana symbols. So Thassa is often just a 5/5 for 3 that's indestructible. So it's already very strong in a world of Fatal Push where people are using that as their primary removal spell in a lot of decks over Path to Exile. So it's hard for people to kill Thassa, and then it could just make our stuff unblockable, including yourself. So it's chipping in for 5 damage repeatedly, letting us scry extra lands out of the way to find our Master of Waves, find our wizards. Another great finisher. So these are our main payoffs for our devotion plan. Master of Waves also a wizard as a bonus, although we don't typically want to sack it to Void Mage Prodigy. For our spells, we got a couple options. 2 mana leaks, just to have a counter. Cyclonic Rift, just a one-of. I would have played more, but it's weirdly expensive, even though it's been reprinted, because it's like ultra staple in Commander. But Cyclonic Rift, great payoff for making a ton of mana with Nykthos, bounce all of our opponent's stuff, clear blockers out of the way, swing in with our wizards, and close out the game. Mana base, really simple. We talked about Nykthos in conjunction with Maloku, but it's our way to add a ton of mana thanks to all our blue mana symbols. Just dump our hand on the battlefield really quickly. And then 20 islands. As far as the sideboard, we get some more counters. Disdainful Stroke, really good right now. Good against Tron, good against Storm, good against control decks. A great sideboard counter spell. Negate to deal with non-creature things against combo. We are a little bit worried about those matchups, even with our counter spell for Spike Birds. It's nice to have a little bit more in the sideboard if we're playing against a combo deck. Then we have River's Rebuke, which is kind of like a budget Cyclonic Rift. This would just be Cyclonic Rift if we had the budget for it, but River's Rebuke does a pretty good imitation in a two-player game. We use all of our Devotion Nykthos mana, bounce all our opponent's stuff, close out the game, Vapor Snake for removal, Sorcerer's Spyglass to deal with things on the battlefield like Ugins and Planeswalkers. Teferi is great in control matchups, makes it really hard for our opponent to interact with our stuff, also lets us flash in our creatures, which is kind of nice. Sun Droplet for aggro to gain a bit of life against burn and decks like that. And that is Mono Blue Wizard Devotion for Modern, and that's our budget Magic deck for this week. So I think this deck is super fun. I've been super happy with it. I think it is actually pretty competitive. It plays in a really cool way. If you like tribal decks and also like devotion decks, you're really going to like this one. It's competitive, it's fun, it plays some really cool creatures. So anyway, let's get to the video so you can see how it works. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoy the videos. Also, happy holidays to all of you, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.